This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We are internet friends turned real-life friends who both experienced the tragic loss of our sons to sudden infant death syndrome in winter of 2021.
In the year after Aiden died, my husband and I both became unemployed. My parents divorced, and we had to move 5 times for various reasons.
And as for me, just a few weeks before my son Quinn died, my then husband had come out to me as a transgender woman, and we're subsequently divorcing.
It's been a lot.
It's been a lot.
But as long as we're living, we will love our sons deeply and work to make sure that we live a life that makes them proud.
Welcome to As Long As I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here.
Hi, everyone. This is Judith, and I'm Aiden's mom.
I'm Alina, and I'm Quinn's mom.
And Jen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jenn, and I'm Aeron's mom.
Perfect. So I know Jen because after Aiden passed away, my sister was doing research for me on what testing options were available because I was concerned that a future baby would die of SIDS. And so we found Aeron's Foundation, which does genetic testing for people. Is it just SIDS families, or do you do genetic testing for other?
We can help facilitate, but we fund the testing for all SIDS families.
They fund and facilitate genetic testing. And when I spoke with Jen, I was just so overwhelmed with her compassion and just her understanding of what it's like because she had lost Aeron. And so she really understands that paperwork is overwhelming and logistics are overwhelming. And like spending your days talking about autopsy reports is not enjoyable at all. And so I found her to just be a really comforting resource. And one of the things that really stood out to me, which is why we want to talk to her today, is that she actually works in the medical space. So correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, you are a pediatric cardiologist. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. She's a pediatric cardiologist, and your husband's a pediatrician. Is that right?
Yep.
So they have a really deep knowledge of infant and child care, and their son, Aeron, passed away of SIDS. And so it was really helpful for me to just understand the science behind it. And also I was just in awe of your ability to continue working in the field that you work in, even after Aeron's loss. So we'll dive into going back to work. That's going to be our topic today, going back to work. And is it possible? Is it not possible? But first, we want to hear a little bit about Aeron. Like if you could just give us like 30 seconds on what made Aeron special and what you love and miss about him every day.
Of course. I love doing that, as every mom does.
Yeah.
So Aeron was 10 months old. He was our second child, our first son. And we really, we're so thankful for having him. We thought that our family was complete. We envisioned having 2 children, and he was just healthy in every way. He was vibrant. He was cruising along already. And I think we really underestimated how fragile even a near toddler could be.
And so after Aeron passed, one of the things, let me give some context. One of the things Lena and I say to one another all the time is that our jobs are so stupid. So stupid. Alina, how would you describe your job?
I do technical project management for the software team at a shoe company.
She helps sell shoes, okay? And I help, and I
not even important shoes, although some of the brands are like work boots and whatever, but like fashion shoes.
I like shoes, Alina.
We all do.
You are offending me.
We like shoes, but I mean, after your child dies, it's like, how can you care about shoes? And my job is just as stupid. And but your job is not stupid. So your job, can you talk a little bit about after Aeron passed, what was the process again of getting back to normal in terms of going back to work? What were some of the things that you were considering? Did you feel my job is stupid too? Did you have this feeling it's just that in the wake of a loss so massive that everything feels stupid? Or are we feeling this way because our jobs actually are
stupid?
They are not. But I thank you. That's, a huge compliment, to me and my job. I'm a pediatric cardiologist. My subspecialty, unfortunately, there is one for children, is in heart failure and transplant. So a lot of my job revolves around seeing this very sick children's population who, for some reason or another, have a heart that's barely working and survive, telling the parents, teaching them about that, trying to support them to avoid a transplant. And if we can't do that, then to walk them through the process of transplant, which is incredibly emotional and sometimes doesn't have a happy ending. And I find my job incredibly rewarding, the relationships that I build with the families and just the honor of being able to support them at that particular traumatic time in their lives. But just like with anyone else who's lost a loved one, especially a child, I feel a job, is no longer on your radar. I think that my circle of what I cared about in the world closed so tightly, and I was just in my own space, and I had no capacity to care about anything except for Aeron, losing Aeron, and intermittently my family and my daughter. But even that, being a wife and being a daughter and being a mother was a struggle. And I remember even the decision of what to eat for dinner, or the act of trying to get up to make dinner, was just this huge overwhelming task that we had to do every day. So yes, I did not have any sort of emotional capacity for my job. And I remember at some point telling my mom was very worried about me, and as all mothers do, try to provide advice in a very, she's coming from a great place, but here I am thinking, you have no idea, have you lost a son? What is this moving on? There's no moving on. Let me teach you about the pain that I'm in. And I think there was a lot of self-righteousness as well within me, but also I think it was probably to some degree true that only I knew what I was experiencing, and I didn't care about work. Whereas she at some point told me a few months later, I know you don't care about work right now, but this is the grieving you and not you. And so as your mother, as your loved one, I'm telling you that you do care about work. You will care about work. And so I feel like it's up to me to remind you of that until you do again.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that she said that really stuck with me, and I appreciate.
Yeah.
So during that time, were you going in or you weren't going in? Like, you took time off?
I took a solid few months off. I had a lot of vacation time accrued because before then, we felt like, work was just a joy. So we didn't take too many vacations. You can't go anywhere with 2 kids anyway. And I was lucky enough to have a boss at the time who was just incredibly understanding and would be very flexible with the time I spent off. And so I think I took 3 to 5 months away before I started to go back just for my own routine and need to establish, myself again in society again.
Yeah. I want to just touch on something you just said. You were so lucky to have a boss that was so understanding. And I think, I have also felt at times how lucky I am that I've had certain coworkers or a certain amount of understanding in my environment. But it's a shame. It should not be about luck, because there are a lot of people that don't have that. It shouldn't be luck. Let me put it that way. This is kind of a human experience to lose someone and to grieve. And obviously it should not be a human experience to lose and grieve a child, but to have to advocate for yourself in the workplace on in addition to all the other stuff you have going on. It's just so awful to me that we have to feel like we're lucky. Isn't that sad? It just makes me so sad for the people who don't have that luck. I'm using air quotes.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I mean, different people grieve differently and process sorrow differently. My husband actually really wanted to go back to work as soon as possible. I think I begged him to stay home with me for at least a few weeks. But I think his support system was at work, and he wanted to remain meaningful in his work as a way to help process the acute grief. And that was his way. It was very different. I sought out support groups, but since having lost Aeron and since meeting a bunch of families who have lost children, I think after all this, I realized that we are incredibly lucky. There are families who don't have the financial capability to stop working, and there are families who deal with financial destruction just from the paramedic bill and the hospital bill, the funeral, these are all secondary wounds, because you don't think that after having gone through this loss, you should also have to pay for it.
Oh my God.
But just so our listeners know, I will go ahead and share. So we had a $3,000 ambulance bill, which was just to transport my son, who was already dead, to the hospital. $3,000. We paid, I believe it was a $2,400 emergency room bill. Then we also had $300 for the cremation, hundreds of other dollars for other various medical people who dealt with, again, he was gone. It probably cost us upwards of $5,000 just to have him be dead. And it's nobody, you don't want to pay that money. Nobody wants to pay it, but it's a bill that comes in. And I was so tired. I was like, okay, I'll just pay it. I didn't have it in me, but I know that this is the kind of thing that is extremely burdensome for a lot. It was burdensome even for us, and it's burdensome for so many people. They cannot afford to pay all that. It's just awful.
It is.
And what about, so I spoke about this on the podcast earlier a few months ago. I was on the airplane and the person behind me had a seizure or something. We thought that he was dead, and I went into PTSD trauma. So how did you handle going into a space where children die? You see children who pass sometimes, or children who go into cardiac arrest and are on the verge of death, and not. How do you function in that space? Because I think the PTSD takes over.
Yeah, absolutely. Death is hard for, even though we see it in the medical field, it's always hard. It's just, I think, a human condition to feel empathic toward the family who is losing someone, even without the trauma of having lost your own child. And it's always been hard for me. So that's a really great question, and something I actually didn't anticipate coming back to work, because I was just not thinking that far ahead. I really just wanted to move and regain routine. The first time I saw a child of similar age to Aeron, even in clinic, not even, in the hospital, I felt very anxious. And after that first initial experience, I actually told my clinic schedulers to put the younger patients with other providers for a few more months, because I wasn't ready. And so I saw adolescents who came through for the first few weeks, or actually first few months. Eventually, I think I got enough into the routine, and it's like riding a bike after a huge, accident. You start very slow, and then I pick up what I felt like I was ready for. And again, my workplace was just incredibly supportive throughout this entire process. And I think that I needed to learn actually how to be more gentle and patient with myself. Here I was trying to do something after an incredibly traumatic event and not really having the patience to start slow, or learning after the fact that I needed to be a little slower.
It's almost like you see, maybe you can't handle seeing a 10-month-old patient right away, but you're in the clinic, you see a 10-month-old, across the room, and maybe that's your first exposure, and that is really hard. And you process that as it comes. And then maybe next you are walking down the hall and you are called in and you see a 10-month-old for a couple of minutes, and that feels okay. It's like you have to do these little tiny baby steps. And I think a lot of times life doesn't necessarily afford you that opportunity, but that is how I've had to deal with triggers. If, for me and Judith, I think you probably feel the same. It's like if at all possible, little bits at a time. Right. But it must be hard when, I think that was really smart of you to ask for older patients, because I can imagine that gave you a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah, I think that I really learned, and it was helpful because I just really didn't care about anything else after Aeron died. My job, in fact, was more of a distraction than an actual, need to work. Yeah, I just needed something to do with my time that felt productive. And so I just, learned to advocate, this is what I need. This is how I can be helpful in this arena. I will not be helpful if I start bawling in front of your 10-month-old child. So please do not put me in that position. And I actually spent quite a few more months just maybe working 3 or 4 days a week. I again was very lucky to be able to find a therapist, and I spent I think a good year in therapy once and sometimes twice a week. So that took some time away from work as well. I also went to support groups for a few times, although I actually felt a lot of anxiety with just the thought of going to a support group and hearing everyone else's story. So that didn't last too long.
Judith can relate to that. That's how she goes too.
And I think that really taught me that, in a world that loves to have answers and loves to be black and white, there is just so much variability in how people can process the same events. Mm-hmm. And we all need to be gentle and kind with ourselves.
I want to ask, so you said you went back to work. It took you a couple months to even go back. And then it took you a couple months to kind of get back into the swing of doing kind of your real job. Was there a moment you remember where you were like, I'm back at work? Because I will tell you, I have not hit it yet, but I'm only a year out from the loss.
I think that there's never been that aha moment, but there have been multiple times when I'm in, I'm just a regular day, no specific trigger. And I just think back to where I was 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, and realize I'm not quite there yet, but I have come so far. And I think focusing on the progression instead of the end goal has made it a lot easier to feel encouraged.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And sometimes I have a similar thought, and sometimes I imagine myself from today talking to the Judith of 6 months ago. I'll have this moment where I'll just want to reach back in time and give her a hug and be like, look, you can do it. You did it. At first the idea of even going back to work for me was this huge obstacle. I just could not imagine how I possibly could do such a thing. And then the first week back was exhausting and overwhelming, and I was grieving, I was crying in meetings. It wasn't my best moment. And now I am in the swing of things more, and I wish I could, and I imagine myself going back to that person and just giving her the biggest hug and being like, this is so hard, but you're doing it, keep going, Yeah. That's what I wish. I wish that I had. I feel like I would be annoyed if someone else told me that, but being myself, saying you can do this, you're doing it, feels good to know that I've made progress.
And I think what you're saying is really important because although none of us wish for this to happen to anyone, least ourselves, I think we are uniquely in a position where when someone loses a loved one, when someone loses a child particularly, your voice and your experience and your journey is something that that person can have hope for.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if it were me, I was just saying earlier, I was angry at my mom for giving me all this advice because she had no idea. But if I had a friend who had gone through some sort of loss similarly and told me something similar, I would be so much open and I would actually feel reassured and encouraged. So yes, this
100%.
is a unique and unfortunate position that you have.
Yeah,
we all have.
It's the worst club, but it does have some very good members in it. That's what I'll say.
Yes.
And I'll also say, just saying to our listeners right now, like if you are finding us and you're very newly bereaved, please reach out to us. We'll say our email at the end of this, and we also put it in the description, and we would love to chat with you. But yeah, it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
I had a question because I had to find a new pediatrician for this baby that I'm pregnant with, assuming it lives. And I had to find a pediatrician, and I found a pediatrician that lost a child too, like through connections. Someone knew someone who's whatever. And when I went to the pediatrician's office, our listeners will know, I had to go to meet her, and I had like a grief attack, and I was sobbing on the floor pretty much the entire appointment. Like she found me on the floor. And what made this doctor special is that she didn't ask me to get up. She got onto the floor with me, and she answered all my questions, and she kind of gave me guidance from the floor. And she said, like, I've lost a child. Like, I know how terrifying it is to try and have another baby right now. And I guess my question is, like, do you feel, first of all, do you disclose to your patients that you lost a child? Do you feel like you're a better doctor to your patients that are in this vulnerable position? And do you think that you would advise, like, do you feel like that experience that I had is unique, or do you think that doctors who've lost children almost can be better providers because they can meet their patients where they are?
Answering the last question, because I do feel like my practice has been affected. I can't speak for all providers. There are many wonderful ones, even without having gone through a traumatic experience. But in my own practice, I do feel that my experience has allowed me to be more empathic with families going through difficult times and to be a lot more understanding of where they're coming from emotionally. So I do feel that I have become a better provider with the growth that I've experienced and I think, self-reflection, as well as the understanding, the emotional journey. It hasn't been for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to other doctors to say, to show them or teach them? How can we teach our doctors to be more empathetic? How can we teach our doctors to be better providers to us in vulnerable positions? Like, what can we do to make this experience better?
I think that as doctors, oftentimes because our schedules are limited, our time is limited, and we might feel that we have the diagnosis and we have the counseling for a particular disease, or we already know what we want to say. I think that it's important to first and foremost listen to the patient, truly understand their concerns and their priorities, because it really doesn't matter if we're right about a diagnosis. If we can't truly connect with the patient, the communication is completely ineffective. Mm-hmm. And I think that most patients will probably nod and be thankful, and perhaps not even on a conscious level realize that their full needs aren't completely met. But there is a chance to connect with another human being here and to deepen that relationship that you have, even if it's within only 30 minutes of conversation, and truly reassure a parent, not just of the diagnosis, but also of what they're worried about specifically with a diagnosis.
And do you think us as patients, like grieving moms, patients, do you think that, like, what can we say to providers so they understand the trauma that we're coming from? Like, how can I communicate to a doctor, like, I'm not a normal patient. I need help beyond your diagnosis. Like, I need you to explain this to me. I need you to have patience with me. I need you to understand that I'm coming from a place of fear and trauma. Like, how can we articulate that?
I think you just articulated it beautifully. I mean, I think open communication and having the courage to admit those things, which sometimes I think takes a moment for you to reflect and understand that that's where you're at, and then verbalize it. And that's the part that takes courage, because you're telling someone who you probably met for the first time. I think that is exactly what needs to be done for a physician or anyone you're talking to truly understand how to meet you where you're at.
I think there's also there feels sometimes like a power dynamic between physician and patient. And obviously the physician does know more about, whatever's going on medically, but I do think like patients can and should say if there's something that they can make their experience better. Like it's not like you can't speak just because they're a doctor, it's not like it's like a parent and a child. It is different.
It is. And I think it's important for doctors to be aware of that. And I think because we are often busy or thinking about other things, we might not remember that, even if we kind of know it in the back of our head. Yeah.
Right. Like for the patient, like the two of you together, like you both have the same goal, right? Which is to provide the best care for yourself as the patient or for your patient if you're the doctor. So you're both on the same team, ideally. So yeah.
Absolutely.
But it is tricky. Judith, you had a question. What was your question?
Yeah. So I wanted to go back and ask if you tell your patients that if that's ever come up where you disclose that you lost a child.
I don't go out of my way to tell the patients. I don't hide it either. So there are a handful of patients who do know. I think almost all of my transplant patients know, because they probably at some point or another asked one of my colleagues, why I disappeared off the face of the earth for the better part of a year. And those are patients who we have a much closer and long-term relationship with. We tend to know like sibling names, what the family's going through, socially, emotionally, financially. And so I feel that it is actually really important in that relationship to at least be transparent with important elements of my own life, not necessarily every single detail, because they're coming for them, not for me. But if something big has happened in my life that may affect, how I act or how I approach someone's care, I think they should know that. And especially if they ask, I'm not going to lie and say I was on vacation. But I'm very, very careful to not bring it up as like, I know how you're feeling because I lost a son, because that's absolutely not the right time. Anyone who is going through something difficult in the hospital has the right to be grieving their own loss and not mine as well. And for me to say that I know how someone is feeling is complete lie, because we all go through we may experience a similar situation, but we go through different emotions and reactions to that. And I don't know at all what someone else might be going through, even if they lost a son. I think the circumstances
are different. I mean,
mm-hmm.
You lost your son in 5 minutes. Aiden died, they said, within 2 minutes. I think they said that since it occurs. These are, I'm sure your patients that have, they lost a child. It's probably months, if not years of, tests. And it's a good different loss too. So it's impossible to understand.
Yeah. Once or twice, I have attended a funeral of a patient, and in a letter written, you know, about my own loss, and also some, you know, bullet points on things that helped me get through acute grief. Again, not, you know, so that I can be relating to them, but more so that if my experience can in any way help another family member, whether it is, you know, during a patient's life or after their death, you know, in any way that I can make the world a better place because of losing Aeron, you know, I consider it, you know, a way to honor him and my experience by proactively doing that.
Judith and I both feel that same way. I can tell Judith's smiling too, because I think we both feel that same way. And part of, you know, this podcast is just for us. And it also, both of us can recognize that it is helping other people. And that also feels really good. For me, it's like Judith was saying earlier, like if a random person was like, oh, like someday you'll laugh again, I'd be like, fuck you. Like, no, I won't. But to hear like someone else who's also lived through the same thing be like, yes, this is as hard as it feels. That said, eventually you'll laugh again because it happens. Like I've been there. I have lived the same trauma, and it doesn't feel exactly the same. We each have our own different unique scenario, but like there's something like the camaraderie of sharing such a horrific loss and to see the blueprint that other people leave. Like that's the key. I feel like that feels so much better than just like some random platitude from like your, you know, college roommate's mother, you know?
And
Yes.
I spoke to you pretty early on. I spoke to you before I met Alina. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if she can work, maybe I can work one day too. Like the fact that you had a job that, you know, seemingly you probably had to remember details and like show up on time and like probably had to get dressed every morning. So the fact that you could do that to me was definitely like, okay, somehow life goes on. I can't figure it out right now. I can't see the future for myself right now. I don't believe it right now, but I see you and I know that if you can do it, it's possible, you know? So I think sometimes it's just helpful to know other people.
They survived.
Yeah, well, you know, listeners can't see you, but I can, and I'll tell you that you're killing it right now. You look good.
I did get dressed. And then there was the one time where I put toothpaste on his lotion. So
do you have a favorite memory of Aeron you'd like to share? We've asked all our guests that. I'm not just saying that because you said that, but I genuinely want to know. Like, do you have a favorite memory you'd love to share with our audience? Or two or three?
I have many, many, many. I think that the one that comes to mind is just, you know, how sneaky he was. He was like so, I mean, we were busy with 2 kids and a dog, of course, but, you know, I'd be cooking in the kitchen. I turn around for a second, and then the next second I look at him, he's looking at me with his big innocent eyes with his mouth full of something. I go over to him, I open his mouth, and he like ate a glob of Play-Doh, like bright blue in his mouth. Disgusting. And he's so proud of it, so innocent. Yeah.
Oh my God. The smile on your face when you talk about him is so beautiful. It's like, it's just my favorite thing. Every time that Judith and I get a chance to like just share memories, it's just is the best. It's so rare. It's sadly.
No one ever asks me.
No one asks.
No one asks.
Yeah. That's why we like to talk about them on the podcast. We share little memories here and there. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's always just, it makes me so sad because every story about my beloved child is about a child who died. So the end of the story is really sad, but there are so many beautiful moments before he died that are, it's just so wonderful, you know? So yeah, we get it.
Can I ask a question about your husband? I mean, you may not know the answer, but like, did your husband, as a pediatrician, had he encountered SIDS before? Like, was this like a concern that you guys had, like, weighed on your mind before? Or yeah, I mean, in our training, SIDS is one of it's the highest
it's the highest number of infant deaths. Like, for all the reasons why babies might die, SIDS takes up most of that. And we were fully knowledgeable about the risks of SIDS. I think it just like any other specific medical condition, it was not personal to us until it was. Mm-hmm. And James is just amazing. He uses Aeron, talks about him constantly with his patients, to counsel them on how to, how to maintain safe sleep practices, mm-hmm. and the implications and the incredibly low risk that's not zero. And God forbid you're in that very, very tiny percentage. And he does this every day, and he teaches his students to do this. And he actually, one of Aeron's foundation's major components is providing education in sleep sacks to the community and the hospitals, and he's a major driver behind that.
You mentioned Aeron's foundation. I would love for you to tell our listeners, what is Aeron's foundation? What motivated you to start it? I mean, besides obviously your son Aeron, but what do you guys do, and where can they find Aeron's foundation?
Thank you for asking. So I never was the type of person that, I wanted to, start a nonprofit. It was not, something I anticipated, but it was something that with James's passion for reaching out to people about SIDS and preventing this and providing support, as well as our close network of family and friends who had, the resources and the expertise, we were able to very shortly after Aeron died build a foundation. And, it's been slow growing, but our initial vision was, just very simple, to build a future free from suffering caused by SIDS. And yes, it's lofty. We will probably not achieve that in our lifetime, but if no one works toward that, it'll never happen. Mm-hmm. And to do this, we have two parts. We provide education and safety material to new families. Because we're both connected to children's hospitals in Los Angeles, we're able to, provide sleep sacks, free sleep sacks to new families. We're focusing on the lower income families because SIDS actually very commonly hits low income families. Mm-hmm. We have pamphlets. We have a board book that we've partnered with Charlie's Kids, which is another SIDS foundation, to provide books on how to maintain a safe sleep environment. And the other part of it is to support families who've been affected by SIDS, mainly low-income families. Again, we just provide financial aid to these families. Typically, the SIDS counselor, SIDS resource nurse, which every city or every county should have one throughout the nation, will have, through the public health department, have a list of patients or have a list of families whose children died by SIDS. She will fill out a financial aid application for the family typically. She's the one in our county. Luz is just absolutely amazing and kind-hearted. We'll reach out to the family, ask them how they would like their financial support, and we'll mail it to them or we'll personally give it to them. We had some issues with the mail through COVID, so we've been actually hand delivering them, which, gosh, was at first incredibly triggering and still sometimes is. But I think that there is incredible value in meeting someone face to face who has shared the exact same traumatic experience. And families are, of course, incredibly grateful.
Yeah.
I wanted to share one other very exciting piece of information. So you, do you have other children, Alina?
I do not, no.
Okay. And Judith, you will very shortly.
She will soon, fingers crossed.
Yeah, guys.
And
baby lives, we have to add that aspect.
I want to re-emphasize how scary of an experience you're going through right now. I completely agree. What James and I also found incredibly difficult was actually telling Eris, our daughter, what happened. I mean, how do you explain to a 3-year-old what happened? Like, and how do you do that in a way that they can still feel safe about the world and not worried about their parents, and yet not recognizing that something big has happened is, first of all, not healthy, because she's gonna wonder where her brother is and if people in her life just disappear for no reason. And also, you know, there's so many things going around her, you know, it is disconcerting and worrisome. And unless it's addressed, you know, it can really impede, you know, her understanding of things. And it has been a really long road, but Aeron is actually turning 5 at the end of this month.
Happy birthday.
5.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. We've really we've really made an effort to make this timed with his birthday. We are publishing a book called Aeron in the Sky, and it is a book to preserve and teach children that even though loved ones may not physically be here, a relationship with someone you love continues, even if the physical component isn't present. And it continues in our memories. It continues in when we think about them. It continues through the love that we have for them, and it continues through our family members. And that's not something that's very obvious or easily stated. I think society is, you know, understandably puts death in a negative light and tries to protect children from sensitive topics like this. And so we are including a very detailed tips section to teach and to advise family members on how to talk to young children about death when it occurs. We have, James and I, as pediatricians, have wrote it. We have child psychologists, psychiatrists, end of care doctors look through it to give their feedback and their input. And so it's definitely coming from a place that you know, people have looked through it and thoughtfully put this together. And I really hope that families who are in that same situation might benefit from it.
That's a beautiful way to honor Aeron.
It's a beautiful way to honor Aeron, and I'm sure there can be so many families that are going to read that book, and like the children will realize their family looks different, but it's still family.
Yeah.
It's you know, even if it just helps one family, that's enough.
To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow. Yay!